Hello and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking into something you flagged as interesting, the launch of XRP Futures on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, the CME, back on May 19th, 2025. We've got a couple of briefings from XRP Briefing, one from May 20th, one from the 19th, plus some news articles from around that time. Our mission really is to unpack why this seemingly, significant event, a major exchange listing a new product for a big cryptocurrency, didn't really cause the price of XRP to skyrocket. And as always, our expert is here to help us sift through these sources. Ready to dive in?
Absolutely. Let's get into it.
Okay, so the CME, they're a really established player in traditional finance. They launched XRP Futures and also Micro XRP Futures on May 19th. This is confirmed in that XRP briefing from the 20th. And yet several news outlets reported it too. The standard contract, that's for 50,000 XRP, and the micro is smaller, 2,500 XRP.
Yeah.
So here's a key detail, I think. They're cash settled.
Right. That's important.
It means no actual XRP changes hands when the contract settles. It's all based on the price difference. The EXRP briefing from the 19th also noted the first block trade, that big privately negotiated one, was cleared by Hidden Road, at least according to Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse. So, sounds like a pretty big deal, right?
You'd think so.
Why this sort of muted market reaction then?
Yeah, that's really what's fascinating here, isn't it? This disconnect between what you might perceive as a universally positive event and how the market actually behaved. The XRP briefing from May 20th really highlights this. The launch didn't lead to a price surge. In fact, XRP prices kind of stagnated or even dipped a bit. Bitcoin.com reported on the 19th, the day of the launch, that XRP was trading around $2.35, which, while that was down 3.2% from the day before and down 8% over the previous week. So it really raises that question. If a major exchange like CME lists XRP futures, shouldn't that signal more institutional interest and, drive up the price?
Exactly. That's what feels counterintuitive. The EXRP briefing on the 20th does suggest a few key reasons for this. Lack of immediate excitement. The ongoing lawsuit with the SEC is definitely a big one. Creates a lot of regulatory uncertainty.
Huge uncertainty.
But they also mentioned just a general cooling of investment sentiment in the crypto market overall. Could you elaborate a bit on how these factors might sort of overshadow even positive news, like the CME listing?
Well, yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, that regulatory uncertainty from the SEC lawsuit, it's mentioned in both EXRP briefing reports and outlets like Brave New Coin on May 20th. It just casts a long shadow. Investors are understandably hesitant, right? They don't want to make big moves when the fundamental legal status of XRP is still, up in the air. The briefing on the 20th actually called this a credibility discount.
A credibility discount, okay.
Yeah, basically meaning investors are valuing XRP lower than maybe it otherwise would be, just because of these unresolved legal risks. And then on top of that, the XRP briefing from the 19th and news from Mentrade on the 20th pointed out that the broader crypto market was just weak that day. So XRP was likely impacted along with everything else.
So it wasn't just an XRP-specific thing. The whole market climate played a part too.
Precisely. Yeah, the timing wasn't ideal in terms of broader market sentiment. And EXRP briefing on the 20th and the Crypto Basic on the 19th, they bring up another really key point. This news might have simply been priced in.
Okay. The old buy the rumor, sell the news.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
The CME actually announced they intended to launch these futures way back on April 24th, so May 19th was just the day it actually happened. People might have already factored that expectation into the price in the weeks leading up to it. The Crypto Basic article even draws parallels with Bitcoin and Ethereum futures launches back in 2017 and 2018. In those cases, prices actually saw correction shortly after the futures went live.
Interesting. So maybe a sell the news phenomenon was at play.
It certainly suggests that possibility.
Okay, here's where it gets, I think, really interesting. The EXRP briefing on the 20th and also Crypto Potato on the 19th really emphasized that because these are cash-settled futures, there's no direct need for institutions to go out and buy actual XRP. It's purely a bet on price movements, right? Speculation on the price.
Exactly.
So the listing itself doesn't automatically create that buying pressure on the underlying asset, on spot XRP. That makes logical sense, but it still feels a bit counterintuitive for a major listing, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. It's not what you might immediately expect. And the XRP briefing on the 20th also mentioned that technical analysis before the launch actually showed some potential downward pressure on XRP's price. Plus, there was a decrease in open interest. That's the total number of outstanding futures contracts on other exchanges.
Okay, so less activity or maybe caution elsewhere.
Could be. It might indicate a cautious sentiment or maybe some people taking profits just before the CME launch happened.
Okay, so let me try and recap this. The sort of muted reaction seems like a cocktail of things. You've got the ongoing regulatory baggage with the SEC,
Yep, the big one.
a generally soft crypto market at that specific time.
Right.
The news itself being anticipated, maybe already priced in. The fact that cash-settled futures don't directly drive spot demand for XRP.
A key mechanical point.
And maybe some pre-launch technical indicators suggesting caution or potential downside.
That's a really good summary. Yeah, that covers the main points highlighted in the sources.
Yeah.
And the XRP briefing on the 20th also points out one more thing. The initial trading volume on the CME for these new futures was, well, pretty low.
Ah, okay, so not a huge rush of activity right out of the gate.
Exactly. It suggests that while the product is available now, the big institutional players might be sort of waiting on the sidelines, waiting perhaps for more clarity on the regulatory front or just observing market conditions before they commit significant capital.
Right, makes sense. So looking ahead, the XRP briefing on the 20th concludes by suggesting some key things we should all keep an eye on. Obviously, the trading volume and open interest in these CME XRP futures themselves, see if that picks up. Any developments in the SEC lawsuit, that's critical.
Absolutely critical.
Progress on stablecoin regulations, they mentioned the Genius Act in the briefing, just in the context of broader regulatory clarity.
Yeah, the whole regulatory landscape matters.
Overall market sentiment, of course.
Always.
And naturally, any movement on a potential XRP spot EPF. The CME listing is seen by some, like those Bloomberg ETF analysts mentioned in the briefing and the Crypto Basic, as maybe a necessary step towards eventually getting an ETF approved.
It's often seen as laying the groundwork, providing that regulated futures market data that regulators like to see.
Okay, so what does this all really mean for you, our listener?
Well, the launch of XRP futures on the CME is undoubtedly a significant step. It signals more institutional acceptance, or at least access. However, as our depth dive into these sources shows, the immediate market reaction, or lack thereof, is shaped by this really complex mix of factors, especially that lingering regulatory uncertainty. It seems to be a major drag.
It really does.
So the fact the price didn't surge immediately isn't necessarily a sign of, failure for XRP. It's more a reflection of the current market landscape, the specific nature of cash-settled futures, and those unresolved fundamental issues. It really highlights how even positive news for a digital asset can be overshadowed by bigger picture stuff. And it raises an important question, I think, for you to consider. In this digital asset world, how much weight should we really give to these institutional on-ramps like futures listings when those fundamental regulatory questions are still hanging out there, unanswered? What does it tell us, perhaps, about the maturity of the XRP market itself, that it doesn't just react to news in a purely predictable, positive way anymore?
Definitely some food for thought there. Well, thanks for joining us on this Deep Dive today. If you found this analysis insightful, be sure to hit that like button. It really helps us out. Until next time.